Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Welcome to the Arts and Farts channel. And as many of you might know, this is the Where in the World is Your Music Studio segment. I'm really pleased to have a wonderful guest here, Kristi Bryson, who will show everyone her music space. And I'm really looking forward to this chat because we have covered a lot of different musicians on this segment, a lot of different music studios. We've had quite a few string players. Last guest was a keyboard player and drummer. And so now we have a coloratura soprano singer on with us. So I think that's really, really neat that we're covering a lot of different musical backgrounds here. And Kristi is coming to us from Munich, where she currently resides. So she'll tell us a little bit more about life there and when she moved there and all that. And I'm really looking forward to this. I've had a lot of fun doing these tours of people's music studios, not only just because I think it makes for a great segment on YouTube, but also when I'm visiting people, I always like to kind of snoop through their music space and, you know, see what CDs they have and just kind of go through their stuff generally. Kind of weird, eh? But this is kind of an interesting way to do that so everyone can see. And I'd really like to thank a lot of the musicians that have been on here because they've been pretty brave and open for showing their music space. I mean, pretty much to the whole world, right? Because we're streaming live on YouTube. So I think that's a pretty amazing thing to just kind of open up your living space music studio to the world. So yeah, let's bring her on now. I'm going to ask to unmute Kristi here, and then we'll just do a sound. Kristi's here. Hey, how's it going?
Doing well. How are you?
Great, great. Let's get started just by saying, what time is it over there in Munich?
It is 7 o'clock.
So, yeah. Okay, 7 o'clock at night. It's 1 p.m. here in Brossard, Quebec. So that's not too bad of a time difference, but still it is a time difference. So you can see by back here, there's a lot of sunlight and it's still pretty bright over there, right?
Oh, sorry, we have some visitors already.
All right. But why don't you introduce yourself to our viewers briefly?
Well, my name's Kristi Bryson. I'm a soprano originally from Ottawa. But I studied in Nova Scotia at King's College and Dalhousie University. And I lived in Montreal for a number of years where I was doing quite a bit of singing. And I also have lived in the UK. I did my graduate degree there at the Royal College of Music in London. And these are my two sons, Henry and Matthew.
Hi guys, how's it going?
Budding musicians themselves.
Yes, it's exactly, yeah. Well, we'll talk about that a bit later because, yeah, they're sort of following in your footsteps a bit. So, yeah, I think actually the last time we saw each other with your husband, James, who was an old friend of mine, was back in Montreal in the Notre Dame de Gras borough there in the west part of Montreal. So that was a really nice last visit before you guys took off and moved again. So,
yeah, we've been on a bit of a world tour since then.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I was about to say when I just saw you alone there, I was going to say, thanks a lot to the people behind the scenes who are keeping, you know, if it was really quiet and you saw nobody else in the background, there's a lot of people behind taking care of our kids. You got 2 sons and then I have like a 3-month-old daughter. So if there was nothing else happening and, you know, kind of in the background, we'd have a lot of people to thank for keeping them quiet. But I'm glad you brought your sons on screen because it's really neat to kind of see all the action, everything that's happening around the house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Hi guys. Fantastic. Well, let's take a little tour of your music space, and if your boys want to help out in showing some stuff, they can. They're more than welcome to join in the dialogue here. Great.
Yeah. So. My music studio is in our living room, dining room area. So it also doubles as a playroom. And yeah, well, do you want to just show them our piano first? Yeah. So Matthew here has just started learning the piano.
Okay.
So our piano is here in the living room.
I can play.
And how old are you, Matthew?
How old are you?
6.
Wow. Okay. I was about 6 when I started the violin.
Ooh.
He's 4.
4. Awesome. And you're a Transformers fan, I see. Bumblebee.
Let's say a bit about this studio first.
This is not a studio. This is the living room.
Well, it's also my music studio. So why don't you go see Daddy for a minute, and then maybe you can come back in and do
No,
it.
it's the living room.
Sorry.
No, that's exactly what
This
it's
is what it's like when I'm
It's
trying to practice.
fantastic. So that answers one of my questions I was going to ask you. Is your music studio more of a private place or more of a common place? But I guess it's really open to the whole family.
Well, the great thing about my studio is that it opens up onto a beautiful garden in the back. So right now it's pouring rain, but usually during the day, the kids can just play outside and I can see them while I'm practicing.
Yeah.
And we have a nice door to this space. I always like to have a door wherever my music room is, so that whoever's in the rest of the house can get on doing their stuff and I have some privacy.
That's great.
Yeah.
So it's behind a closed door. And actually kind of an interesting point is, do your neighbors like hearing music coming from the house? Because there's definitely 2 types of people, those that like to hear music and those who really don't like to hear music.
Yeah, I know. I've been really lucky because I think singing especially especially coloratura sopranos can be very loud. I'm obviously practicing really high notes a lot of the time. But I've always had really accommodating neighbors. I think only once ever have I had a complaint about the noise, but my neighbors here, they said that they love it. So
yeah. Well, that's fantastic because, that I think some people complain about hearing musicians practice or sing because they know they can control it and complain and possibly put an end to it. Whereas if you live on a noisy street and there's lots of cars and sirens going by, you can't stop that. You totally don't have the power to do it. So of course, people don't yell out the window and complain, but it's kind of the things they can control. And it's sad that sometimes it's music that they really want to stop. So, and yeah, but I've been lucky as well, actually, in my old neighborhood of Notre Dame de Grave. My downstairs neighbor loved hearing me practice. And if I was away for a couple of days and I came back, he was like, "Why haven't you been practicing?" It was like a field trip. It was like being a student again. So anyways.
I'm really lucky in Germany too, because they actually have very clear laws about music practice.
I heard about that, yeah. So can you explain again?
So they have this Ruhezeit time during the afternoon. It's usually from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. where you're supposed to be quiet. You're not supposed to do any yard work, mow the lawn, anything like that. But it doesn't apply to music practice. So I think you can technically practice from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and no one's really supposed to complain.
And that's in law too, right?
Yeah, it's in law.
Yeah, there's some pretty creative laws. I think there's even some laws about brewing beer or something like that, or maybe some standards put in place. But that's really fantastic. That reminds me a lot of music camp that I'm artist in residence in Camac, and they have quiet hours from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. But of course, you can't practice during that time. But I like how it's kind of designated for the musicians. So that's really neat. Fantastic. Well, let's start out. Like, how would you describe your music studio to you? I mean, you already told us a lot about it, but what does the space mean to you? What are your feelings when you're in it and you're working in there?
Yeah, I like to have a really big open space. I think for singing, it's obviously quite physical. And sometimes there are a lot of really strange little physical tricks that you need to do to get your body warm, which then gets your voice warm. So I feel like this space sometimes doubles it as a bit of a fitness studio as well. And I can show you, I have a lot of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually, start with, I have my yoga mat, which I use a lot when I practice. So I usually start with some yoga. And then I have things like one of these big exercise balls.
Great.
So you sit on that and it really gets you connected to your core and your diaphragm. Then the other thing I really like to use is a wobble board, like you'd use at the gym.
Okay.
So I'll stand on this and sing.
Yeah. Now that makes a lot of sense. Some string players also do like some exercises, but a lot of times we have this ability to kind of sort of not hide behind our instrument, but kind of mold to it. But you're really, yeah, I mean, I guess singing, it's really coming from deep within. I couldn't imagine like practicing singing in a room because it's my voice, I'm not hiding behind my violin or something like that. It's very expressive, and it's very much from within.
Yeah, it's obviously feels very personal sometimes. So when, I guess you have to have kind of that confidence. And sometimes when you're singing, you don't necessarily want to be listening to yourself. It's more, you want to be feeling what you're doing. And which is a really hard thing to do. It's hard not to try and hear what you're doing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll even put earplugs in while I'm practicing and try and just go on based on physical sensation alone. Another way of doing it.
Yeah. My memories from being a student, and also like from music festivals, hanging out with singers. I don't want to generalize, but I guess since you give so much of yourself, and it's a very vocal profession, that there's never like a dull moment, especially in a conversation. And especially when if it's someone's birthday and, it comes time to sing happy birthday, or, vocalists will never just sing happy birthday. They'll go on to something else as well. And then usually the rest of the restaurant or the bar is quiet and just in amazement when all these singers get together and sing casually. But it really, I mean, when you're a professional singer, nothing ever just sounds like it's just being done, in an amateur, careless way. It's just like really, always 100% and impressing the hell out of everyone. So I think that's really, really awesome. So yeah. But usually string players won't take out our instruments in a restaurant or something like that, or just random spots. So
singer always has their instrument with them too, so they can't just say,
Yeah, but I'm just surprised at how much courage it takes and how you're all able to do that. That's amazing. So, and I guess that transfers as well to the concert stage, because you're really facing people when you sing. So I think that's really, really quite amazing. We can talk about that a bit later, because I want you to explain a little bit about, your technique of singing. But on with the studio, one thing maybe it's a bad habit. I tend to like focus on something when I play. Sometimes it's not my music, but it's an object in the room. Is there anything you tend to focus on when you sing in your studio?
I really like this this apartment because I can see the garden. So I like to be able to see something that's really far away and imagine that my voice is carrying that far. Because I think probably one of the worst things you can do is when you're singing is to feel like you're contained and you're kind of stuck within a space. You want your voice to feel like it's floating freely and traveling, and imagine you're in the concert hall and it's hitting the very back of the room. And then the other thing I do a lot, which is not so fun, but I have this beautiful mirror here that I watch myself sing in, make sure I'm not doing anything funny and all that good stuff.
Well, that's good. So it's really practical things you look at that really help.
Yeah, I have some paintings around and some photos. Like my aunt is an artist, so I have an English cottage that she sketched, and then I have this print here I can show you of a Cranach painting that I look at. It's just an Adam and Eve.
Oh, nice.
But it's nice to have little art inspiration.
I don't know what happened to our walls in the studio. Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. If you have a neighbor across the street that doesn't like hearing you sing, that's another good focal point for you to sing to. So I know with the string players, we also like to have a focal point in which to play out to, because again, like kind of hiding behind our instruments, sometimes we're a little bit like that when we play. And from a technical standpoint, that's really interesting what you said about projecting outward. And it definitely has an effect on how you sound all the time. So, especially with with singers, I always remember, if you don't carry around an instrument case, you're definitely carrying around a lot of books and scores and partitions and things like that. It's like pianists, there's always like a big music tote bag or book bag filled with things. So you must have a lot of sheet music in your studio, right?
Yeah, so much. I keep trying to come up with a good filing system, and yeah. And a lot of my stuff, because we've been traveling, is in storage too. So that's also a bit of frustration when you don't have something maybe that you haven't used in a few years, and then you think you want to get it out again, and you realize it's actually not here.
Yeah, it's a lifelong pursuit to
in Germany, the publishers are right here, the music publishers, so you can get Bärenreiter scores like that.
Yeah. Well, actually, if they want to make a little extra money, they should offer their services to organize your music.
Yeah,
might be like a good sort of apprentice training thing, is putting all the music in order. So that's amazing. Any like markings or funny things in your music that you really cherish, or any kind of funny things that you've come across, like when looking through old parts?
Yeah, I mean, it's always funny to go back through stuff and see, like, don't be tense here, or keep breathing, like just funny things like that. And I do remember, I don't have them with me, but I do remember a while ago, I was looking through some scores that I used when I was in high school. And I don't know, it's just kind of sweet to see the things that you were working on at the time and what your teacher thought. It's really nice to look back on those things.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe I have like James' phone number on there the first time you got met or something like that.
Yeah, that would have been in my choir book.
Yeah, I know. Then that piece of music would have always remembered that. So yeah. Sometimes I'll find old like rehearsal times and phone numbers of staff accompanists at my school, and it's really funny because it really brings me back to all the other different things I wrote in my music besides practical instructions or notes from teachers. So that's really, really neat. You mentioned you have a lot of things you use in your studio. Is there anything that's like kind of taken up space there you haven't used in a long time, or you want to get rid of?
That's a good question. Yes, there isn't really anything. I think because I've been moving so much that I've just purged whatever I've moved.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything, there are definitely things I wish I had that I don't. But yeah, there's nothing really at the moment that I don't use regularly.
Yeah. That's amazing. I was thinking about in the future interviews that if somebody has something in their studio they want to get rid of, we do that as sort of a door prize for our viewers. If they answer a skill testing question or trivia, you can send them this thing in your studio you never use anymore. That's just taking up space. So, but if it's taking up space, it's probably expensive to send anyway. So
yeah,
I have to find a private sponsor for that. So, but you were like my years of study. You spent years of study in school learning to sing. And you probably spent quite a bit of time also practicing at school. Is there anything you miss about those practice studios at your various schools you attended?
Yeah, the thing I miss the most of all are the pianos. I mean, unfortunately, I just have a digital piano at the moment.
Same here.
It's what fits. But I miss the grand pianos. The Stein.
They take care of them and they tune them. So
yeah, exactly. You don't have to do anything. Sometimes you miss having your friends just in a nearby studio. You can, when you need a break, you just go and have a quick chat, or if you have a question, maybe they could offer some advice about something, or come have a quick listen to what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that kind of community aspect of it I miss. The thing I don't miss is trying to book practice rooms, which is always a nightmare.
Oh yeah, I know. It's especially if you need something with a piano in it. A lot of times people don't know that in music studios at schools, they're usually just empty rooms. It's not like the kind of studios we're talking about now, where we have many things and memories and things that kind of represent what we've done, our achievements in our life. They seem like pretty soulless rooms, and yeah, that's really quite a difference. But yeah, actually the social element that you mentioned about practice rooms, I think is something, I have a lot of nostalgia about. And I remember kind of the code for, do you want to take a break with me, was, can I borrow a pencil or can you watch my instrument? So,
yeah, exactly.
and it's never that. It's like, do you want to get coffee actually now?
Yeah, exactly.
So it can be distracting, at the same time. So, but anyways, that's really neat. But are you able to give us a kind of a panning 360
Sure.
of your space? This is me again, snooping through people's homes and looking at their stuff. So
this is my bookcase. I keep my scores. And then here's my mirror my trusty mirror that I sing into.
Yeah.
And here we have the piano.
Okay, with a window in front of it. That's nice.
With a nice window, kind of very Bavarian looking shed out there.
Yeah.
And this orchid that we inherited and trying to bring back to life. And
yeah, right?
then this is the garden here that I look out onto.
Okay.
And yeah, then this is quite a big space. So yeah, because it's also the dining room.
I see. Well, that's good. It looks like that thing is built right into the wall there. That's not like the
bookcase. Yeah.
Maybe that's in law too there in Munich, that there has to be a built-in music or bookcase in every home. That would make sense.
Well, what I noticed here, unfortunately, this place wasn't like that, but a lot of the apartments that we looked into renting came, because we were looking for a furnished place, that they came with pianos.
Really?
Yeah, which I've never seen that anywhere else, where they would have a piano in the flat already.
Yeah. And usually the kind of selling point, if you want to rent out a place easily, is comes with flat screen TV or free Wi-Fi. But
exactly.
But the piano, I think, is an amazing thing. But I imagine there's like a lot of pianos there, or maybe a lot of old pianos that just people didn't want to spend money to maintain.
Yeah, and the houses here tend to be really well insulated. So I think I always found in Montreal that you could hear a lot of what your neighbors are up to, and here I don't really have that problem as much. So I don't think they hear me as loudly.
Yeah, the miracle of insulation came many years late in Montreal, considering our cold winters there. I can't understand that, but eventually somebody decided it was important, and so. But anyway, so like during this lockdown, you probably had, like me, I've thought a lot about what I do as a musician, especially since a lot of you probably had like a ton of cancellations, and we're spending a lot of time at home, just making music, but also just thinking a lot about what we do, which, normal times, sometimes there's not a lot of time to think about what we do. We just do it, while enjoying it. But if asked today, I thought this is a neat time to ask a sort of question about, how you think music is important to society today, especially since, everything live is canceled. And do you think your answer now would be different than, say like 20 years ago or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say now during lockdown, because like you said, everything's become so much more virtual. But I think that's kind of the main thing about music nowadays, is that there's so much more kind of noise in our society. You go onto your phone, you're bombarded with these sensations and sounds all the time.
Yes, these soundscapes,
and usually ones that don't require a lot of concentration or attention. So now going into, I don't know, to me, it feels like going into the concert hall is something really different from our everyday life, probably more so than it was 20, 30, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, it forces us to be present in a place and to be attentive to what's happening. And, you have to sit there sometimes for 3 or 4 hours to watch an opera.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think in that way, it's a lot different.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was funny. The last time we had a chat, I know that we were having an in-depth discussion about live streaming, and I mentioned to you, and I hope I didn't sound like I was offending singers, but some of the live streams I've heard from singers, that have recorded themselves over the phone. You can tell the singing is amazing where they are, but what's being picked up by the microphones on these little smartphones, the sound quality, like, it's just terrible. Like, the phone cannot handle,
Yeah.
the awesome power of the singing. And for me, I think vocalists are a great example of why live music is so important, because you need human ears to really appreciate this thing we're doing with live streaming performances. It really kind of shows how inadequate technology is to really represent the power of what you do. It's you need the concert
Yeah.
hall, you need this human-made structure, and you need people there sitting in the seats, which really affects the acoustics. So I think probably when you get back on stage, you'll probably feel that sense of importance, right?
Well, yeah, and then there's also that energy too that you get from the audience, and maybe you notice it more when you're singing because you're actually facing them,
Mhm.
and speaking to them directly. But that influences your output as an artist, as a musician in the moment. And in these virtual things, you don't have that same kind of reciprocal energy happening. So it's hard to make music in the same way. But I
Yeah.
think that also has always been a bit of a debate, hasn't it, with just recording practices in general. Like, does a recording of something really compare to a live performance of it? And the difference between a live recording and like an edited recording and all that. Yeah, and now this new kind of virtual concert thing is, yeah, just taking it to a different level.
Yeah, I know I'm remaining really optimistic about the return of concert, just because of this exact thing of web streams, and just how the comparison, especially for people that go to frequent concerts, they can definitely hear the difference and hear what's lacking. So I'm hoping it's gonna, and I know it's making people miss the live concert experience. I think it's kind of a
Yeah.
mixed blessing that way. So
Well,
um,
they're experimenting with a lot of different things actually in Germany right now. So some opera companies have been doing outdoor performances.
mhm.
So you drive up in your car, and it's like going to a drive-in movie theater.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard about that. So they're really doing it full force over there then, right?
Yeah, they've started doing it. A couple of friends and colleagues of mine who have contracts with companies here, they're even in rehearsals for next season, and there's some kind of bizarre things about it because you still have to socially distance while learning your staging, which
Mhm.
in opera you can get pretty up close and personal with people. So you're kind of trying to remember not to get too close. And but yeah, they're starting to do that. And there's a church that we go to on Sundays here, a beautiful Baroque church called the Theatinerkirche, and their choir has started singing again. They just have to wear masks in
Mhm.
the down times, and they sing. I think they're about 6 feet apart from each other.
Yeah. Huh. Well,
Yeah, so
that's
small step.
making it happen. One step at a time. That's really amazing. Um, so, like, we could go into kind of life in Munich. Is there anything you do there, or anything you find you do differently that's really kind of impacted your musical life there? Something that's kind of in tandem with what you do professionally?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest things is the art galleries and just these beautiful museums and palaces and churches that a lot of these composers would have been inspired by
Mm.
at the time they composed these famous bits of music. So that's kind of inspiring to be around those sorts of things. Also, it's just so beautiful here in terms of the landscape. They really love the outdoors and gardens, and we're close to the Alps. So that's also I find a very kind of contemplative thing, and it's inspired a lot of artists as well. So yeah, I found that really helpful, I guess.
It's ingrained in the culture, and it's ingrained in the natural landscape as well, and the architecture. So that's a really interesting point. Yeah, especially about being able to be somewhere and hear the music that might have been played there at the time of its composition. An interesting story. I was in Venice where I got to see the La Pieta, where Vivaldi had a lot. Well, he had his the orphanage there and had the orchestra, the girls' orchestra there. And I got to see his organ that he apparently played. And a lot of people were actually looking at this organ with my tour group. And I had the idea to have them open up the organ so I could smell inside the organ. Weird sort of thing. It's exercising the senses. But I always remember what Vivaldi's organ smells like in Venice. It was a little musty, a little humid. But I always keep that with me, and I know whenever I play, Four Seasons or something like that, I'm always like, all these. So it's cool. You take all these sort of scenic things from Munich where you are, but yeah, exercise all the senses. I highly recommend that. So
yeah.
Sniff the church the next time you're in there, just to kind of see what the ambient smell is like, and that might inspire. So. But yeah, anyways, it's an interesting thing as a singer, everyone is born, with the ability to sing, I guess, at many different levels. You're born with your vocal cords, and everyone has their personal take on singing. And I even try to sing, actually I have to sing during the summers at CAMAC because it's a big vocal music camp. I'm just going to assume that you think that why should everybody sing, or at least try to sing in their lifetime? Why is this important?
That we sing?
Yeah, why should everyone sing? I'm just assuming you think this.
Well, I don't know. You probably are learning this a lot these days with an infant. But singing is one of the first things we do as humans. We sing, they'll make their little sing-songy voices before they can even crawl or even roll over. And I think it's just such an important part of how we express ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I'm also too, I'm rereading The Lord of the Rings at the moment. And it's just interesting to see how the characters, they'll sing a song for everything they do. They're off on an adventure, so they'll have a song for that. And they're off to battle, they'll sing another song, or they're in battle and they're singing a song. It's a way of it's a community building thing. People come together, I think, through singing as well.
That's true.
Yeah. And it's just a way that everyone can make music. You don't need to be able to find any notes on the piano, or you don't have to have any kind of instrument. You always have your voice.
Yeah, I guess song was always passed along from generation to generation in different cultures where, people might not have been able to read music, but it's exactly singing has been passed along. So
it's how we tell our stories, and you notice that with a baby, you're singing to them, and that's kind of a way of telling them a story.
Yeah. Another opportunity for me to flatter singers here. And I have this philosophy with playing any instrument, especially with violin, with my students. I always try to pick up on certain things about the instrument that are beneficial to other parts of life. And, one thing I think, especially with singing, is that it makes, through singing, I find people tend to be more animated when they speak. They have more musicality to their voice, and it's much more beautiful to hear singers talk, because they're used to this kind of musical, applying music to words, And I know with violin, we always try to play the way we sing. But one thing I try to tell, especially the parents of students, is that, this wonderful thing about music, it really animates people's voice, instead of just speaking words, you're really putting music to it. Do you find that?
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so important for kids to sing early on. Because like my son now, he's just started singing this year with a boys choir here in Munich, and he had never had the courage before in his school, school concerts, school plays to actually get up and stand with the class. And there are a lot of kids his age, 4 or 5-year-olds. And this singing in the choir has just given him this confidence. And it's made him more confident even just to speak with other people, with grown-ups. And it's really helped him that he's also starting to learn the piano, and he has such a good sense of rhythm. He knows about breathing, because you also have to obviously breathe when you're playing other instruments. And knowing that kind of pacing in the music. And so I think it's a really great thing to learn from childhood.
Yeah, well, they're definitely courageous just to come right on the camera right when this whole thing started and actually speak to me, because a lot of shy kids will just kind of stare at the camera and not say anything because they seem to just know what they wanted to say and how they wanted to deliver it on camera. So I think their music training is really paying off in probably the social and professional parts of their life. I think it's really valuable, and that's wonderful that you're introducing them to what you do. So,
and it helps them with language too. I mean, that's a huge way that they're learning to speak German, is through song.
Yeah. So in this kind of post-pandemic world we live in, we can compile a huge list of reasons why music is so important, and I never feel I need to really defend it, it's especially from this conversation, I think we're touching on a lot of points, just the benefits and important qualities that music have on society. I think we've been continuing that question that I asked before, and you raised some really, really wonderful points about that. So thank you very much for sharing that. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of end on something maybe non-musical. It could be musical, but especially during this pandemic, is there anything that you've started to do maybe as a hobby or out of necessity, even with the family or by yourself? Anything you kind of picked up along the way
during the pandemic? Well, probably like everybody online, I've done a lot of baking.
It's true, yeah.
I've been doing all the bread and the sourdough and all of that. I just mostly trying to just, I don't know, kind of slow life down a little bit. I've been trying to read more. I took up running, trying to improve at that, because fitness is such a huge part of singing. So you always want to.
It's true. Yeah.
Keep fitness, but also keep your body guessing all the time by trying new things. And we've had actually really wonderful weather throughout most of the lockdown. So, and we have been allowed to enjoy the outdoors here. The parks stayed open. And so I just spent a lot of time just walking and enjoying nature and getting into the German, the Wandern that they like to do here.
Yeah. That's amazing. I know what you mentioned about running and doing things like that. I know for string players, I have this philosophy, just, it's hard to move the smaller muscles, like in the fingers, if you don't exercise the bigger muscles. So everything is so connected. And I think that's a really, really good point you have about that. So I think that's really nice. So, I meant to ask this, does James still play the piano? Because I remember he was a very gifted pianist when I heard him years ago.
I wish he played more often, because it would be very useful to have a pianist for me selfishly. But he actually, because Matthew's learning these little songs and they have, these little duets for the teacher.
Yeah.
He's tried actually to play through a few of them. And so he's kind of getting back into it a little bit, but he hasn't spent much time playing probably the last 20 years or so.
Well, you should make a pact with my wife Avery, because she studied piano when she was really young, and she can read music and play really well, but she's actually, now that she has a bit more time at home, really wants to start playing piano again, and has been noodling a bit on the digital piano downstairs. So
Yeah.
So she's
I
touching.
think when you have so much respect for it, sometimes it's a bit intimidating to just, fiddle away at it.
Yeah.
But he needs to just go for it, I think.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, it seems like you guys are really taking care of the family there, and just keeping the morale up. And it's really, really great to hear that that everything is going well for you guys there. So yeah.
Right.
But one thing I didn't touch on was what makes a coloratura soprano special. We didn't really touch on that, and I meant to do it earlier, so I hope you don't mind I'm bringing it.
Sorry, the kids threw us off for a...
I know, they stole the show.
Well, a coloratura soprano basically is someone who sings, I mean, in singing we call them fox, so they're the different categories of voice type. And soprano and mezzo soprano or alto are kind of the two categories for women. And then those categories are divided up into subcategories. And coloratura tends to be the top of the spectrum. So you sing the highest notes, and usually you have pieces that are very fast with lots of runs and very virtuosic.
Yeah.
So a really famous coloratura role, for example, would be the Queen of the Night in Mozart's The Magic Flute, which is a role that I sing. Another one would be the doll in Les Contes d'Hoffmann, the Offenbach opera. Just anything that you think of kind of very high and twiddly, falls under coloratura.
Yeah, over the top. Well, yeah, it's amazing, all these different kind of sort of sub-disciplines of singing. It's and maybe that came about because as musical styles changed. I know if you look at a genre like rock, people get in this big argument. Oh, it's progressive. No, it's it's classic, or it's hard rock. It's just like, it's amazing that to see even so many years ago that all these different styles and technical disciplines of singing just played such a big role, and they all go together really well, but they're all so different. But I think that's very amazing what you do. I mean, it's really, as I mentioned before, it's just like a hot-rodded soprano. It's like being able to just like go full force and with all the technique. That's really amazing. So yeah.
And sometimes you cross over into other stuff. Like I would sing what are known as soubrette roles as well, or lighter lyric roles, which don't have quite the range of a coloratura role, but maybe similar in personality and character. So
well, thanks for touching on that. It's a lot of our viewers and listeners, we have a lot of musicians watching this, but we also have a lot of music enthusiasts watching this program, and a lot of times they actually know a lot about music, but it's always fun to kind of remind and sort of explain again just sort of these fine details about your discipline. And I think that's really neat that you shared that you're so knowledgeable about that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Well, it's been a fun chat. It's funny being, now almost 2 p.m. here, almost 8 p.m. there. It's an amazing time difference. But it's really great getting back in touch with you. And I hope that next time you and James and the boys are in Montreal, we can all meet up in person once this is all over and reconnect again. So.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This is really fun.
Yeah, it's been great. So enjoy the rest of your evening, and take care, be well, and we'll chat again soon.
Great. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.